So what's going on guys, Kades here and welcome back to a brand new video. For today I will show you the best Lost Ark's PvE meta tier list in 2022 for newer players. So Lost Ark was just released to EU and NA. And right now we have 15 different and unique classes to choose from. So maybe you're wondering which class is the best for PvE, and by PvE I mean all the content like raids, leveling, cube and chaos dungeons and much more. So I've done a bunch of testing and here's the best tier list that you've been waiting for. And just before we start, I have made a full 30-minute video on the best PvE builds for all the classes. So no matter which class you choose to play from this list, check my PvE build video and there you will find the best builds. So then with all this said, let's get right into it. Okay, so then starting with the best PvE class, which is actually the only one that gets to be in the S tier, and it is the Gunlancer. So this class has great monster clear speed early on, with strong AoV abilities like the Sharp Gunlance and Guardian's Thunderbolt. This makes his leveling process easy and enjoyable. Despite his low movement speed, besides damage, the Gunlancer can also support the team with shields, damage reduction buffs and target armor debuffs. In endgame, he can also interrupt many dangerous boss kills with the taunt skill. Then as well, be aware that the Gunlancer is the only class whose spacebar moves them backwards. This is a huge turnoff for most of the players, but after a few days of gameplay you will get used to it. Overall, the Gunlancer is a highly efficient class that doesn't require many resources or gold to be viable. So in my summary, the Gunlancer in PvE is cost efficient, he has high consistent damage, and he can ignore most of the bosses or mob attacks, and lastly he has a well damage reduction and shield buffs. And then for the negatives, he is low mobility. Like I've said at the start, the backwards dodge can get really annoying and you need to get used to it. And lastly, he has bunch of short range skills, and that's about it. So then moving over to the second class, which I put at the A tier, and it is the Deathblade. So this class has big AoE skills with high damage to cut through big mob groups very quickly. She also has good mobility to make the leveling process very fast. Her skills suffer from relatively long cooldowns, so make sure that you group up enemies to kill them efficiently. Normally, a Deathblade's gameplay at the endgame is focused around gaining that orb meter as fast as possible, then unleashing the blade burst and then repeating the same process all over again. So then in my summary, the Deathblade is a very fun and high mobility class. He has low skill downtime, so most of the time you have an ability to use. For endgame you have a team synergy buffs that will make your team do more damage. And lastly you have a very easy death orb management, which are these 3 circles that constantly fill up for you to activate your ultimate skill. And then for the negatives, the Deathblade requires back attacks. Then as well you get severely punished if you miss your skills. And then lastly, some abilities have as well long cast times, and that's about it. So then moving over to the third class, which is the Sorceress, and we put it right next to the Deathblade class. So the Sorceress is one of the 2 starting mage classes available in Lost Ark. She specializes in dealing ranged magic damage with the elements of fire, lightning and ice. This is a good starting class for new players, as she deals high damage at all stages of progression and can comfortably complete solo or group content. So in a quick summary, this is the highest DPS range class that has high burst damage, your cooldowns are very low and this class will be acceptable for any content, so PvP or PvE. But then for the negatives, the Sorceress is very squishy. She has low mobility, long cast times and low push immunity, and that's about it. So then moving over to the next class, which is the Berserker, and we want to put him in the A tier. So the Berserker is a class with high burst damage and large AoE skills. The damage compensates more than enough for the long cooldowns and low mobility of this class during the leveling phase. He can obliterate a group of mobs in a few seconds. So then in a quick summary, unlike other melee classes, the Berserker doesn't have a terrible, but instead a decent mobility. He has bunch of burst rotations, and most of the time he will be in a burst mode, which will increase his overall damage. And then moving over to the downsides, and a lot of times while in the burst mode, you will have to be very careful about your HP, which means that you have less room for errors. The Berserker has long skill cast time, and for the endgame, this class requires for you to use high tier engravings, and that's about it. So then for the 5th class we have the Wardancer, and he is one of the last A tier classes. So the Wardancer is one of the highest mobility classes in Lost Ark, with skills like the lightning kick. The skill has low cooldowns and increases the overall traveling speed during the leveling pace. She lacks AoE skills but makes up for it with high single target damage abilities like the Moon Flash kick and Sweeping kick. This class heavily focuses on swiftness, which increases the movement speed, attacking speed, and reduces the cooldowns of all skills. In my summary, this class is high mobility. She has good stagger, aka stunning skills. This is a burst synergy class with very high single target damage, and you can perform very fast counter attacks. And then for the negatives, sometimes you can get low on mana. This class in PvE depends a lot on back attacks, and Wardancer requires basic attacks and you have long cooldowns on your burst skills. And that's about it. So then going over to the next one, which is our last A tier class, and it is the Gunslinger. So this class can swap to 3 different weapons in order to match any situation, making her a very well balanced class during the leveling pace. She has everything in her kit including mobility, single target and AoE damage. And as you have 3 different weapons with multiple abilities in each one, you can never run out of skills to use. So then in my summary, the Gunslinger has very long range. She is high mobility and has a lot of high crit debuffs. But then for the negatives, this class has low defensives, she is high skill cap to play and learn, and you will do less DPS when playing more safe, and that's about it. Okay, so then we are finally done with the A tier, so now our next class is the Shadowhunter, and we want to put him in the B tier. The Shadowhunter has small AoE skills, but she compensates for that with low cooldowns and high mobility. She is one of the few transformation classes in Lost Ark, with her demonized identity. That means that when this bar is at full, you can activate the demonized mode and become a different creature with different abilities. This adds more mobility and overall damage. So then in my summary, the Shadowhunter has strong stagger. He has low cooldowns on the demonized skills, and then as well you get a small healing with the transformation. And then lastly, you can use this class as a melee or medium range. And then for the negatives, a lot of times you perform inconsistent stagger. All of the builds for this class requires high specialization. At lower levels you get a very quick demonized form. And lastly, at the endgame, this class requires level 3 engravings, which are not that easy to upgrade, and that's about it. So then moving over to the next class, which is the Scrapper, and we want to put him right next to the Shadowhunter. So the Scrapper is an agile fighter class that focuses on purely on melee kicks and punches. Her identity lets her use skills by alternating between both of her energy types, which are called the Stamina and Shock. While lacking in AoE skills during the early levels, she picks up the pace quickly past the level 30. She starts gaining insane damage skills to clear bosses and large groups of monsters at the endgame. Despite so many positives, there are also negatives, one being the lack of ranged abilities. Most of your attacks are extremely close range. They have very narrow hitboxes and small AoEs, but still these skills feel very impactful to use and once mastered don't hold you back. While being one of the tankier melee classes in the game, she doesn't offer any skills with shields or meaningful damage reduction. So then in my summary, the Scrapper class has low cooldowns. She is extremely mobile and can sustain high DPS. But then for the negatives, like I already mentioned, she has no self-protection, she has short range attacks and lacks any significant AoE skills, and that's about it. Okay, so then for the next class we have the Striker, and we want to include him right in the B tier category. So the Striker is a high mobility class with small AoE skills. At early leveling stages, this class is slower at clearing bigger mob groups compared to other classes until you unlock and invest in your bigger AoE skills. But nevertheless, stronger elite bosses and monsters are easy target for Striker's single target focused skills. The Striker is a burst synergy class because of his attack speed buff and crit chance. So then in my summary, this class is a high mobility with fast counter attacks and decent stagger damage. And then for the negatives, he has low defensives, he is very back attack dependent. And lastly, the Striker class has long burst skill cooldowns, and that's about it. So then moving over to the next class, which is the Artillerist. and we want to put him right next to the striker. So the Artillerist is a slow but deadly damage focused class. Most of his skills deal damage in a huge AoE, which helps to clear big monster waves within seconds. Artillerist starts with Enhanced Skill, which applies armor defense debuff on each hit to further increase your damage. This is an easy to learn but difficult to master class. His main damage skills are Air Raid and Homing Barrage, which have delay between hit and cast time. So then in my quick summary, the Artillerist is a high crit chance class, with high survivability and consistent damage output. But then on the other hand, you have low burst potential, slow cast speed, and at the endgame you need to learn each boss's mechanics, and that's about it. So then moving over to the last and final B tier class, which is the Sharpshooter. So this class has skills with low cooldowns and quick animations. Clearing speed might be slightly slower compared to other classes, but his mobility helps in avoiding hits and dealing consistent damage to the enemies during the leveling pace. Sharpshooters suffer from low stagger, so they don't contribute too much to the party besides damage at the endgame raids. So then in my summary, this class has burst DPS, he is high mobility, and you can equip high crit tripods, which are these passives that you can pick for each ability. And then lastly, you can deal damage from any position. And then for the negatives, the Sharpshooter is very squishy, and most of his skills require animation, and that's about it. So then going over to the next one, which is the Soulfist class, and this time we put him in the last C tier. So the Soulfist is a well-rounded class with good mobility, single target and AoE damage. This combination makes the leveling and PvE experience pretty smooth but neither too slow or too fast. This class has World Decimation ability available, which is the highest single target damage skill in the game. She raises both hands into the air collecting energy that forms into a huge dense energy ball that eradicates everything. But hitting with this ability is hard and takes long time, as this is the only special thing about this class. So then in my quick summary, the Soulfist is not a very popular but high mobility class. He has high burst damage and the strongest awakening skill in the game, and fast normal skill animations, but then for the negatives, she has a very long ability downtimes. She is a very resource/gold reliant, and then as well she is very heavy specialization reliant. And lastly, her most powerful awakening skill can easily miss the target, and that's about it. So then moving over to the last and final class, which is in the C tier, and it is the Deadeye. So this class can swap to 3 different weapons in order to match any situation, which makes this a very good balanced class during the leveling pace. He has everything in his kit, including mobility, single target and AoE damage. The downtime for this build's damage kills isn't as bad as it is for other builds. Deadeye can rotate to pistol and rifle stance after he has used all of his shotgun skills. So then in my summary, this class is high mobility. He has decent stagger and all of his skills and things for this class that you need to get are very easy for tier 1 content. And then for the negatives, this class is very back attack reliant. Most of the damage skills are locked behind an animation, and even though you use weapons, bunch of skills are for melee ranged, which makes you either way lose damage or go into a difficult position, and that's about it. So then for one of the last classes in Lost Ark, we have the Bard, and he is a support class. You can't really put this type of class in a tier list, so I made a specific category for the support, so here it is. The Bard is purely a support class for groups and is highly requested role for endgame content. She levels slower than a pure damage class, but still a veteran player can finish the speedrunning the leveling process within 12 hours. While her huge AoE clearing skills are up to par with other classes, she lacks high single target damage. She struggles to kill bosses quickly until you max out the Soundholic ability at level 30. If you want to play a support class, you need to understand the abilities of your teammates and the coordination with them to bring out the best damage. It is easy to play a Bard at a basic level, but the difference between a highly skilled Bard and a beginner is huge. So then in my summary, the positives are that the most of the Bard builds are cheap. It is pretty beginner friendly and she has high self-protection, and this class is always wanted in the endgame raids. And then for the negatives, you have no mobility skills whatsoever, and as you are a support, you become very reliant on your party. And then lastly, you have to learn all of your skills and then the rest of your groups as well, which takes time and can be hard, and that's about it. So then for the last and final class we have the Paladin, and as this is a support class we will put him right in the support category. So the Paladin mainly serves as the support class in groups and is highly requested role for endgame content. However, this does not mean that he is incapable of playing solo, because he has decent amount of AoE damage kills even at the early levels of the game. And remember to group up enemies using AoE skills for the most efficiency. Where the previous Bard support class prevents damage by focusing on high skilled uptime, the Paladin class tries to prevent damage by using damage reduction skills on allies and much more. So now for my last and final conclusions for this class. The Paladin has high survivability, he has high damage buffs and decent party healing over time, and lastly he has high damage reduction for your teammates. And then for the downsides, the Paladin has low shield buffs, he has low heal efficiency, and for this class to work it requires proper positioning. And then last but not the least, the Paladin class has lower mana regeneration buff, and that's about it. So with that said, I really do appreciate everyone for watching guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions, feedback, or maybe you have a different idea about one of the classes on this PvE tier list, then you are feel free to leave your comments in the comment section down below. And while you're doing that, please click like, subscribe and enable that notification bell, so this way you could support the channel and you won't miss any more amazing content from me. With all this said, you have an amazing day and I'll catch you in my next video. So take it easy, peace.
Yo, I ain't here